Hi, I'm Doug from Dynamic Computing, and welcome to episode 73 of 10-Minute Amiga Retrocast. And don't worry, no Ataris this week at all, I promise. This week, we're going to take a look at what I consider to be the best Amiga computer ever manufactured. It's not the most powerful, it's not necessarily the most expandable, but it is the best designed machine with the best combination of features, appearance, and value. And of course, I'm talking about the gorgeous Amiga 3000. Now, the Amiga 3000 came out in June of 1990, and it came out as a replacement for the aging Amiga 2000. Now, you can see from the pictures that she's much sexier and sleeker than the Amiga 2000 ever hoped to be. And it was about 200 pounds lighter, truthfully. Now, the Amiga 2000 could be expanded unbelievably. You could throw in accelerators in there, hard drives in there, RAM in there, but it would always be a hulking beast and far less elegant than the original Amiga 1000 that came out in 1985. The Amiga 3000 sought to change all of that and bring things full circle back around to the elegance that the Amiga 1000 came up with about 5 years earlier. Let's take a look at the three machines side by side real quick, and then we're going to dig into the guts of the Amiga 3000. Now, this Amiga 2000, this is just an empty top case for my Amiga 2000, but I want to put it in perspective of the original Amiga 1000, that cute little guy that's sitting back there, all adorable, and the Amiga 3000. And I think you can see that it's a fraction of the size. And those two machines behind there just look sexier than the 2000. Now let's take a look at what makes the A3000 so special. Since 1985, the Amiga had been based on the 68000 CPU, a hybrid 16/32-bit CPU running at about 7.12 MHz and able to address about 9 megabytes of RAM with the addition of a separate expansion card or interface. RAM was divided between chip RAM, ranging from 512K to 1 megabyte, that can address and be addressed by the custom chips directly, and fast RAM, which talks really only to the CPU. The Amiga 1000 was really limited to 512 kilobytes of chip RAM, while the later A500 and A2000 could be updated to support up to 1 megabyte of chip RAM with a replacement of the Agnes chip. All of this memory was 16-bit memory, which was amazing in 1985, but showing its age a bit by 1990. Now, the A500 and A2000 could both be expanded well beyond these limitations with accelerator cards and other add-ons, but access to much of these machines was still 16-bit. Now, the Amiga 3000 stepped things up a bit by replacing the 68000 CPU with a true 32-bit 68030 running at either 16 MHz or 25 MHz. This particular one's a 16 MHz. Being a true 32-bit CPU could directly address much more memory and could be expanded to 2 megabytes of chip RAM and 16 megabytes of fast RAM. Being a true 32-bit CPU, the A3000 could directly address much more memory and could be expanded to 2 megabytes of chip RAM and 16 megabytes of fast RAM. Now, theoretically, the Amiga 3000 can address up to 2 gigabytes of RAM total, but you would need to add in accelerator memory and fill up all the Zorro slots with fairly non-existent components. Now, this 2 megabytes of chip RAM was an absolutely huge upgrade for us in 1990. Now, in 90, many of us Amiga users were still using machines with 512 kilobytes of chip RAM, which limits how many colors and which screen modes the Amiga could display, and also affected how much audio could be stored in RAM at one time. Suddenly, having 4 times as much chip RAM meant we could work in higher resolutions and multitask more efficiently. This chip RAM was also 32 bits wide, so the CPU could access it faster and more efficiently. Full disclosure, the data path to the custom chips like Denise and Paula were still 16-bit wide. The improvements in performance was dramatic. In the past, if you tried to use a high-resolution screen mode like 640 by 400 and 16 colors, the Amiga performance took a massive hit. With the new wider chip RAM access, these modes suddenly performed quite well. As shipped, the Amiga 3000 had 1 megabyte of chip RAM on the motherboard, and then these dip chips here were actually installed right here, giving you 1 megabyte of chip and 1 megabyte of fast RAM. And then when you go to expand your fast RAM even further using these zip chips here, you take these dips out, you put them right over in here, and you've got 2 megabytes of chip memory. Pretty genius, because adding fast RAM to an Amiga can increase its speed substantially. Now, fast RAM was added with these little zip chips right here. This happens to be a 70 nanosecond one. Now, if there's any complaints about the 3000, these RAM chips would be the biggest one. They're very tiny, and it's very, very easy to bend or break these pins when you're inserting them. Now, you could add in 256K RAM chips. You add them in 4 chips at a time, and you skip to the next 4th socket. So you'd put 1 chip there, you'd count up 4, another chip, another chip, another chip, and add them in 4 at a time. If you use 256K chips, this will fill up to a total of 4 megabytes of RAM. If you use 1 megabyte chips, which is the only way to go, this will fill it all the way up to 16 megabytes of RAM. Trust me, when you have a bunch of these little chips and you're trying to fit them in these little tiny sockets, you are going to bend pins and you are going to miss holes, and your Amiga is not going to recognize all the memory. I've owned this Amiga 3000 since 1991, and I've bent RAM chips so many times in this little guy. Now, this RAM can either be page mode or static column RAM at 70 or 80 nanoseconds. Static column works a little better. It can be about 5 to 10% faster overall, since the 68030 can do burst modes, reads and writes to it. Now, it's possible to combine both the static column and the page mode. It's not recommended, but if you have to, you can. If you do that, put your static column in like the first 4 megabytes of RAM, and then the page mode last, and it works a little bit better. So far, we have a much faster CPU, we have faster RAM and more RAM, but what else does the Amiga 3000 bring to the table? Well, it came out with the ECS chipset. This is a combination of the 2 megabyte Agnes chip, which should be right here. This allows it to address up to 2 megabytes of chip RAM. Now, on the Amiga 2000 and 500, you could add a 2 megabyte chip with a special adapter like the Mega chip that you go and you steal some signals from other pins. But in general, those two were limited to the 1 mega Agnes in general. They also addressed their chip RAM 16 bits only, where on the Amiga 3000, the CPU could access the chip RAM at a full 32 bits, but the custom chips like the Denise and the Paula still accessed it at only 16 bits. Now, the other new chip was the Denise, which I've stolen out of this motherboard right here and put into one of my Amiga 2000s. This is an ECS Denise, which stands for Enhanced Chipset. And then they started calling the originals the Original Chipset, or OCS. Now, what this does, it gives you access to more screen modes above and beyond the original chipset. This Denise could output a rock-solid 640 by 480 screen at 31 kilohertz called Productivity Mode, but it's limited to only 4 colors on screen. It also offers super high res mode at 1280 by 200 or 1280 by 400 resolutions. Now, other resolutions were possible with ECS, but those are the standard ones that it came with. The ECS chipset, which included either a 1 meg or 2 megabyte Agnes and the enhanced Denise chip, were available for the Amiga 500 and the Amiga 2000, but really weren't available for the Amiga 500. Now, the new 31.5 kilohertz productivity modes were great, but we really didn't need it on the Amiga 3000 because of one of the best expansions it has. This is the Amber chip right here. What Amber did is it took the standard Amiga modes, anywhere from 320 by 200 all the way up to 640 by 480, and it scan doubled and flicker fixed them. So you could now get a full 640 by 400 screen with absolutely no flicker and hook it up to a standard VGA monitor with this adapter. It also has the benefit of being able to run any game or any program, whatever, off of this 31.5 kilohertz signal because it does not need any drivers to do it. It just grabs the signals and fixes them and sends them right out this port right here. Now, of course, all of this signals still work fine on their traditional 23-pin RGB connector, which is right here. So if all you had was a 1084 monitor or something like that, this still worked perfectly, and you were still able to get a deinterlaced productivity mode, albeit in only 4 colors. Now, another fantastic thing that Commodore added on to the Amiga 3000 was a Scuzzy controller. Here you've got the floppy connector, then you've got a 50-pin Scuzzy controller right here, all controlled by this Western Digital Scuzzy 2 chip. Now, the built-in Scuzzy on the Amiga 3000 was pretty fast and a huge upgrade. Scuzzy was superior to the common hard drive interfaces of the early 90s, being able to handle up to 7 devices, including CD-ROMs, scanners, and removable storage. It also uses less CPU resources than other technologies like IDE. You could add Scuzzy devices either internally with this connector here or externally on the 25-pin Scuzzy connector. And it would allow you to hook up things like CD-ROMs, scanners, external storage devices, things like that. Scuzzy drives are a little hard to get a hold of nowadays. They're hard to find. Our friends over at Inertial Computing sells the Scuzzy to SD adapter, which I'll show you in a moment. It allows you to use almost any size SD card as a Scuzzy device. The A3000 is capable of about 3 megabytes or more data transfer, so the Scuzzy to SD version 6 is probably a better choice. I have a version 5.1 in my Amiga 3000, and I get about 1.6 megabytes out of it. The Amiga 3000, which the inside of it, which I'll show you in a minute, has a tray for an internal hard drive. Now, how about the expansion capabilities? Well, the A3000 came with 4 Zorro 3 slots right here. Zorro 3 was created by the brilliant Dave Haney. Hey, Dave. A man many of us know and who is still active in the Amiga community. Zorro 3 was slot compatible with the older Zorro 2 of the Amiga 2000, but was much faster. Theoretically, devices on this Zorro 3 bus could transfer data at about 150 megabytes per second, but due to limitations of the Buster chip on here, you really could only get 13 or 14 megabytes per second. Now, in theory, this architecture could have been continued to be advanced in future Amigas to make it faster while still being backwards compatible. Zorro 2 and Zorro 3 cards can coexist just fine, no problems at all. Zorro 3 also supports auto-config, just like Zorro 2, which means when you put an expansion card in here, the Amiga pretty much recognizes what it is and sets up all of its hardware settings for you. Now, you still need to put a driver in there for almost anything to access it, but it takes care of any kind of hardware assigns for you. Now, what about these other slots over here? Well, these two are 16-bit ISA slots for a PC. And what you do with these is you put a bridge board in here. Like I've got an A2386 bridge board. It connects to the Zorro and to the ISA slots, and it bridges the PC and the Amiga. Then you've got this second 16-bit slot here where you can add a device to. Now, I had my bridge board in here, and then I had a 16-bit multifunction card in this slot that would allow me to have VGA, hard drive controller, a separate floppy controller, and serial and parallel ports. It's pretty cool, actually. Now, up here, this is a video connector, similar to the video connector on the Amiga 2000, but pinned out a little bit differently. This passes the video signal straight through, which is how you can have a Toaster 4000 installed in here. Now, it's a tight fit, but you can do it. And it uses the video signals to handle the gen locking and communicating with the video signals on the Amiga, and then the Zorro 3 handles everything else for the toaster. Now down here on the board, we have the same CPU expansion slot that they have in the Amiga 4000. So many, but not all, Amiga 4000 compatible CPU cards would fit in here. So I could take my A3040, which gives me a 25 megahertz 040 chip, and I could put that in here and upgrade my Amiga immediately to a 68040. Now, this is a much lower profile than the Amiga 4000, and you've got things like the drive tray here, so some larger cards literally do not fit in here. So your mileage may vary. Make sure you get one that's designed to fit on the Amiga 3000. Now, let's take the lid off my beautiful Amiga 3000 and see what we have inside. Always have to unplug your keyboard and mouse and everything. And I've already got the screws detached. This is partially my Amiga 3000 that I bought in 1991. The motherboard I was showing you earlier is my original A3000 16 megahertz board, and the board seems to have failed in about 1997. So last year I replaced the board with a 25 megahertz 030 that I had in a big old bulky tower. You can learn more about that upgrade in my A3000 video that I did last year. Well, the abridged version is I did not find many of the critical parts to my original Amiga 3000. I had the case, I had the motherboard, I had the floppy, but I could not find the drive tray, which is this right here. You see it's screwed in right here, and it basically supports the floppy and the hard drive and the power supply. This I couldn't find at all, and I couldn't find my power supply to save my soul. Just no idea where it went to. So in my video I did last year, I created a plexiglass tray that I could sit the floppy and the hard drive on, and I used my old Amiga 3000 power supply that came with my tower system, which was huge. I mean, I'll show you a picture of it. It's just gargantuous compared to what this Amiga 3000 floppy is supposed to be. So my good friend Jack from Pints and Amiga YouTube channel heard about my plight, and last year he sent me an extra drive tray he had. Just out of the blue, he sent me this tray, which was just awesome. And then last week, he sent me a spare Amiga 3000 power supply that he had. Jack is the guy. He and his son Taylor have done Pints and Amiga for about as long as I've had my channel operational. Every Saturday, they get together, they play Amiga games for a couple of hours, live streaming it on YouTube on real Amiga hardware, and they have some of the best Amiga hardware collection that I've ever seen in my life. It is just fantastic. Check out their channel, subscribe to them, watch their shows on Saturday. They're awesome guys. Now, once I had the new drive tray and the new power supply, I was able to bring my original Amiga 3000 back to life. This is the Scuzzy to SD card that I told you about. This one has a 4 gigabyte SD card in it. These are put together by Inertial Computing, designed by a gentleman named Michael, actually. This is the 5.1 version, so it's not as fast as the Amiga 3000 can theoretically handle, but it does a really good job, and it lets you use a SD card of almost any size. I wouldn't go above like 128 gigs, and I'd probably stick to 64, but it does allow you to use it and hook it up to just about any kind of Scuzzy device that you... Now, because the Scuzzy to SD is so small, and it does not have a standard hard drive footprint, and the connectors don't line up, what I did is I used some thick foam double-sided tape so it would not short it, and I just stuck this right on top of my floppy drive. The case closes up, the thing works perfect. And if I need to get to my SD card for anything, I can just pop the lid off and pop my SD card right out. It really works out nice. Now, it also would be super easy to get another floppy tray right here and mount this with a special 3D printed mounting kit that's available for these, and have the actual SD card stick right out the front of the floppy, so you could just pop it in and out as you needed to if you wanted to add things to it. Another little quirk with my Amiga 3000 is my LEDs were dead as a doornail. When I powered it on, the Amiga would power on perfect. I would get no lights out of either power or the hard drive LED. I have no idea what happened to them. I took my multimeter, I checked the voltages going in and out of the LEDs. They were perfect. It was 5 volts going in, and I could put my multimeter on the hard drive connector here, and when I'd access the hard drive, the multimeter would flash like crazy, but the LEDs did nothing. Now these LEDs are a little hard to find. So the original LEDs are supposed to be this wide, going all the way out. Could not find any of them in my local electronics store, but I did find these that were the same height, but just half the width. So when I put the case on, they look a little funny because they only light up half the little area there, but they absolutely work. Now the new LEDs are 3.3 volts, and this cable here puts out 5 volts. So underneath this beautifully done electrical tape, I actually have a resistor under there that takes it from 5 volts here to 3.3 volts going to these little guys here. They both light up fine. Now they also both worked at 5 volts. They were just incredibly bright and they got incredibly hot, so I know they would burn out pretty quickly. So now that I have my Amiga 3000 alive again, I can start upgrading it again. So far what I have in here is it's a Zorro 2 card, and it is a USB controller called the Thylacine. Now, these are notoriously slow, and they're notoriously performance sapping. So you really need a fast CPU for this to work, but it absolutely gives your Amiga the ability to hook up like a USB flash drive, USB mouse and keyboard. I use this little guy right here, so I can hook up a little my SD cards in there. I can put my compact flash in there. I can put a little flash drive, and it's a great way to transfer data back and forth without having to pop out the SD card. I really, because it does affect the performance when the USB is active, I only turn the USB on when I need to use it and then turn it off when I'm done. It makes it run a little faster. Now, if I put my 68040 in here, I think the performance would be fine, and I could probably keep the USB live all the time. So what else am I going to put in these slots here? Well, once I fix my bridge board, I'm thinking about putting my bridge board back in here. That's one option. I also have a personal animation recorder, or a PAR card, that was given to me by my good friend Chris Edwards, who also has a YouTube channel that you've absolutely got to subscribe to. I'll have the link down here and the link in the description. So if you want to watch a YouTube channel where you can watch someone curse at their Amiga while trying to beat some new card or device into submission, you got to watch Chris Edwards. And just so you know, Chris is the guy that buys all those Amigas in the USA right out from under you. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Now you'll also notice here that the power switch is actually broken. I have a little piece of tape on it there just to give it something to push against. There's supposed to be a brown button that comes out about 3/4 of an inch so it can connect with the stem coming all the way out here to the power switch. That button's broken off so the stem doesn't reach. So what did I do? Let me show you. So this is the inside of the case. Here's the stem that goes to the power switch. Now, I just put one of these little standoff nuggets. These are the kind that say go on the bottom of a motherboard or go on the bottom of a card and allow it to stand off a little bit. I noticed that it fit perfectly in the slot of this stem here, and it was the perfect distance to hit the power plunger and turn it on and off. I've just put a piece of nice tape around it to keep it snug in there so it doesn't wiggle back and forth. But I've been using this for days, and it turns on and off every single time. So it's just a nice way to kind of jury rig it back to health. So in booting this up, what I've got is I've got Amiga OS 3.1 ROMs, and I have Amiga OS 3.14 as the operating system. Now, I'm doing that because I already had a SD card that was already formatted and ready to go. I want to get some real Amiga OS 3.14 ROMs in here. It'll save me a little time on rebooting, and it works better with the Scuzzy controller. Now the first Amiga 3000s, they would soft kickstart into there because it wasn't quite ready to go. They had a version called Amiga OS 1.4, which was basically just an updated 1.3, and they had these little ROM towers where the ROMs go, and it would apparently temporarily flash the kickstarts into here or something. Newer Amiga 3000s got rid of the ROM tower and they just had the standard ROM chips in there. Speaking of ROMs, Amiga 3000 came out with Amiga OS 2.0, which was a huge upgrade. It was much more professional looking than the cool blue and orange that we used to have on our Amiga 500s and Amiga 2000s and 1000s. It was a nice grayscale, although you could make it as colorful as you wanted to. It added cool features like data types. It added features like the ability to use more screen resolutions for your workbench. So if you wanted a 1280 by 400 workbench, no problem at all, you can do it. If you wanted a 640 by 400 workbench in 16 colors, no problem, you could do it. Now, Amiga OS 2.0 came out a little bit later as an upgrade for the Amiga 500 and the Amiga 2000s. They could handle it just fine, and it even ran on 68,000 chips okay. Now the performance is actually really quite good on the Amiga 3000, especially at 25 megahertz. It's nice and zippy when you're moving around in 8-color mode like I'm doing right now. You see there's really not too many delays in what you're doing. If you want to bump it up to a 16-color mode, no problem at all. Let's get out of there. We'll bump it up to a 16-color workbench, and it actually performs okay here too. You can see it absolutely is slower than 8-color, but if you tried this on a 68,000 machine like an Amiga 2000, it would be 4 times as slow. Now, one of the other cool things about OS 2.0 and newer ones like this is you can theoretically boot up just fine in PAL mode too. You're not only limited to NTSC, but you can boot up in PAL mode just fine. With the new 2 megabytes of chip RAM, you could go into things like this super high-res mode in Deluxe Paint. It's a 4-color mode, but it absolutely works and it performs pretty well. We're limited to only 4 colors, but the responsiveness is actually just fine. Draw some pictures on here. Isn't that exciting? The ability to use things like your word processor in high resolution mode is quite useful, except I can't spell. And you're able to see things just beautifully on the screen in nice non-interlaced displays. Let's take a look at a couple of games though, because I know everybody's interested in that. How does the Amiga 3000 handle games? Well, just fine. This happens to be a Black Crypt, which is one of my all-time favorite Amiga games. It uses 64 color extra half bright mode, which is cool. Let's make sure she works. And no problem at all. Black Crypt loads and works just fine. You can run into walls all day long without any problems on this computer. Let's take a look at a few more recent games. Now, one of the cool things that the enhanced chipset came up with, and Amiga OS 2.0 and above, is you could do a 2-finger salute with the mouse button. Hold down both mouse buttons when you boot, and it gives you some options, including display options, and you can tell it to boot into NTSC like all the cool kids do, or you can boot into PAL like other people do. Click on Use, and we'll boot, and we'll see what game we've got in the floppy drive. Tiny Little Slug, one of the best games so far of 2020 on any platform in existence. Look at those beautiful ECS graphics. Such a lovely, lovely little game. And our little slug game works just perfectly. Audio works fine. No issues at all with this one. And it plays great on a 68030. Here's another relatively modern one from 2018. This one is Mod Surfer, where you can load up just about any mod file you want to within reason, and it'll build this track that allows you to do like a Guitar Hero type game based on mod files playing. We'll crank up the music for this one, blow your eardrums off. And the goal, of course, is to run over all the little tiles and get the best score. You can see on a 68030, it performs flawlessly. The scrolling is just incredible. This game can get crazy fast too. So the 68030 is actually a pretty good chip to run games on. It works fine with WHD load, and a lot of people say it's actually more compatible with a lot of games than the 68040 is. So in its native 16 megahertz or 25 megahertz, it's a pretty good WHD load game machine. So why do I say the Amiga 3000 is the best Amiga ever made? Well, Commodore saw the shortcomings of the Amiga 2000, which is a gorgeous machine, and I love mine, and no, you can't have it. But they saw the shortcomings of it, maybe the slow Zorro, the limits to the chip RAM, things like that, and they addressed the specific shortcomings of the ECS machines, and they fixed them. They put in the hard drive controller, they put in flicker-free video, they added faster Zorro slots for newer, more powerful expansion cards. And they made it absolutely gorgeous to boot. It is a beautiful, beautiful computer. The small form factor and the nice lines on it make it look like a professional workstation, where the Amiga 2000 looked like a big old beige box machine, and the Amiga 4000, while it is beautiful, was kind of generic looking. Now, I am a big fan of AGA, or Advanced Gradient Architecture, as my friend Boat from the Amigos says. There he is right there. And the A3000 almost had AGA. They were working on a machine to replace the Amiga 3000 called the 3000 Plus, which was going to have the AGA chipset and all of the advanced features and form factor of the Amiga 3000. But Commodore, in their infinite wisdom, thought it was going to be too expensive, and they wanted to go a cheaper route. So instead, they built up a lower end machine that they were working on, kind of the Amiga 2200 or Amiga 3200 machine, and they just added some features to that, but kept the slower cost-saving features like IDE instead of Scuzzy, that kind of thing, and came out with the Amiga 4000. Again, I'm okay without AGA on this. ECS does some really nice quality work. You guys have seen a lot of my videos in the past where I've done work with Ham6 pictures that, are surprisingly good quality. And if you want to get something like a DC TV to give this thing 24 million color capabilities, or throw in a Ham-E or a retargetable graphics card, like a Picasso card or one of the Retina cards or the CyberGrafx cards, you can get this thing up to a 16 million color workstation without any issues at all. Now, even after I got my first PC, which was an IBM Blue Lightning processor, which was a 486 running at 75 megahertz, I still used my Amiga 3000 for a lot of things because I liked it better as a computer. I couldn't stand Windows 3.1. I had OS2 Warp on my 486 machine for years, but I preferred to use the Amiga for a lot of the stuff that I did. I suspect that if my Amiga 3000 had not died in 1997, I probably would have stayed in the Amiga community instead of dropping out for years like I did. Now, I'm very pleased to have my Amiga 3000 back up and running. I've been having so much fun with this thing, and it's been bringing back so many memories of the kind of stuff that I used to do on it. It's just a blast. Now, what am I going to do next with it? Like I said, the PAR card's going to go in here. We're going to have some fun with that with Chris Edwards' PAR card. I'm going to get a Scuzzy to SD version 6 to speed up the hard drive a little bit more. I'll probably toss in my spare A3040 40 megahertz card since I'm not going to use it too much for game playing. Why not get the best performance I can out of it? Now, I guess I could get one of those ZZ9000 cards, one of the new graphics cards that are out there that can add a bunch of RAM and a bunch of extra stuff. This hobby gets really expensive. So all I've been doing is fawning all over this Amiga 3000. About the only thing I've criticized was their choice of using zip RAM because it's annoying. Not because it's not fast, it is, but it's just annoying to plug it in. Once it's done, it's done. The other thing that I wish they would have worked a little harder on is the keyboard. Now, pretty much the Amiga 3000 keyboard is the same as the Amiga 2000 keyboard. It's fine, it's sturdy, you can beat somebody to death with it if they try and steal your Amigas because it's so heavy. But it would have been nice if they would have gone like the Amiga 3000 route and come out with a sleeker, slicker, cooler Amiga 3000 keyboard that more matched the smaller form factor of the machine. It just would have been kind of cool. Matter of fact, I liked my Amiga 3000 so much that from 90, probably late 91, early 92 when I bought it, up until Commodore folded, I really didn't feel a pressing need to get an AGA machine. I was so happy with what my Amiga 3000 could do. I looked at the AGA machines and I thought, yeah, you know, maybe if they come out with something in a smaller form factor like the 3000, I'll bite, but I don't really need it. I didn't want to go to an Amiga 1200 because I had my big box and, you know, they get addicting. Now, I would like to thank my wonderful patrons. If you would like to become a patron and help support this show, I would appreciate it. Just go to patreon.com/10mark and you can become a member of my Patreon community. All kinds of cool perks, all kinds of cool stuff, and I tend to offer a lot of help to my Patreons too behind the scenes. Here is a list of my current Patreons superimposed over a beautiful picture of an Amiga 3000. Thanks, everybody. So thanks for taking the time today to spend with me and enjoying and learning about this Amiga 3000. Sorry about the time. I think I went over my 10 minutes by, a minute or two, but it happens every once in a while. It's okay. Please like and subscribe. Comment below. Tell me your opinion about which Amiga was the absolute best Amiga of them all. It was a tough coin toss between the Amiga 1000 and the Amiga 3000. But the features of the Amiga 3000 just put it over the edge for me. But until next time, this is Doug from 10-Minute Amiga Retrocast, getting back out there on the streets to try and have people change my mind about whether or not the Amiga 3000 is the best Commodore Amiga computer. Signing out.